Welcome to the Pen to Publish podcast with your hosts, Alexa Whitten, author, typesetter, and independent publisher, and
Alexa Tewkesbury, author, editor, and proofreader.
Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of the Pen to Publish podcast with Alexa Whitten and Alexa Tewkesbury. And today we're going to be talking all about the who. Because if you don't know who you're talking to or you don't know who you're writing to, not only is marketing the book going to be quite difficult, if you're not actually talking to the person who's going to be reading the book, it's going to be muddy. It's going to be not particularly clear, and you're going to lose your readership because unless you're really talking to the who, you're going to be talking to nobody. And obviously you don't want that with your publication. So this week, I'm going to be talking about obviously finding out who your target market is in terms of business books. And Alexa's going to be talking about who you're going to be talking to in the fiction side of things. And next week, we're going to be really delving into the whole children's book aspect as well. Knowing who your ideal reader is really important. And I'm going to hand you over to Alexa now so she can start to explain a little bit about the fiction side of things, of why that's critical. And then I'm going to be talking about how you can find those people, certainly in the business sector, by using groups like Facebook and LinkedIn, etc. So Alexa, over to you.
Okay, well, the first thing to say is if you don't know who your reader is when you begin to write, then you won't be able to target your writing appropriately. So the reader that you want to appeal to in fiction will affect your plot, your style, the word count, the vocabulary you use, even your characters and the setting and the whole genre that you choose to write in. And similarly with non-fiction, the book you're writing has to be appropriate to the subject matter and to the reader of that book. And I know it sounds obvious, but it's very easy to get so caught up in the initial excitement of your idea and the actual writing that you forget who you're doing it for, who you're aiming your book towards. But you need to keep that in mind throughout your writing. So, for instance, there's no point in writing, say, a literary style essay on the life and works of Sylvia Plath and submitting it to Take a Break magazine. Does Take a Break magazine?
It does. Take a Break does
Take a Break. See, they won't be interested in what you want to say really about Sylvia Plath just because it won't suit their target audience. And part of your job as a self-publishing author is to do the research and find the appropriate outlets.
Yes, it'll be so much easier when it comes to doing your marketing and you're submitting exactly what you said. If you don't know exactly who it is you're writing to and your target audience, you're going to have a scattergun approach, which is going to be really less effective. So yeah, it's really important.
Yeah. So the second reason why knowing your target audience matters is because, as I said, as a self-publisher, you're going to be responsible for selling your book. You don't have a publisher behind you sending you on book tours and getting your book on the 3 for 2 tables at Waterstones. Selling it is your responsibility, and the only way to sell effectively is to target effectively. Mm-hmm. Now, what can help with this is having someone very specific in mind who you can imagine reading and loving your book. So your ideal reader. And as you probably know yourself better than you know anyone else, you can use yourself as a starting point. So if you want to write fiction, not absolutely, but I think it's fairly safe to say that you would want to write what you like to read. You've probably heard the writing advice to steep yourself in the genre that you want to write about. And honestly, why would you steep yourself in a genre that you don't like if you're going to spend all that time reading? So, for instance, I love to read crime. That's just my favourite fiction choice. But I also like to watch crime and thriller and murder mysteries in films and on TV. So when I decided recently I wanted to produce a fiction podcast, that's the genre I immediately went for in my writing. But then in trying to identify your target reader, you need to ask yourself some questions. So think, what is my favorite genre? What TV do I like? What films do I like? Even what magazines and newspapers do I choose to read? What types of articles interest me? What interests me in general? Do I like art galleries or museums? Or do I like going to football matches? Am I passionate about the environment? Where do I like to go on a day out? Where do I choose to live? There's so many questions that you can ask. Even, how old am I? Not that you want to restrict the age range of your readership, unless, of course, you're writing for children. We'll be talking about that in a future episode. But you're just trying to identify your reader and the person most likely to want to read a book like yours. then when you've got this description of yourself and your likes and your dislikes and your habits, there's quite a big chance that this will also be the description of your ideal reader, your target audience, because it's very likely that those are the sort of people who are going to be interested in what you write. So that's not to say that all the readers have to be like you, and they won't be, but it's a really good place to start. And then something else that can help you to discover your target audience is to look at books out there that are like yours. So same genre, same sort of subject matter. And who's talking about these books? Who's giving them good reviews? Who's blogging about them? There are so many book bloggers on social media these days. And if there are people enjoying books in the same vein as the books you want to write, those are likely to be the people who will enjoy the books that you write. So next you have to find them, and Alexa touched on this at the start. So it's, where are they? Where does your target reader spend time online, on social media? You know, who's on Twitter tweeting about the books in your genre? Who's retweeting author publisher tweets about them? Who's Instagramming about them? Now, you'll likely know this anyway, but Bookstagram on Instagram is such a big thing, and people are so creative about raving over the books they love. They set up beautiful photographs with books in, with perfectly placed lattes on the side. And then there are the Facebook groups as well for readers of certain types of books. And if you find the groups that are interested in the book you want to write, you're going to be finding your audience, your perfect readers. And then you mentioned LinkedIn, Alexa, that I'm not sure if you feel that's more on the business side than on the fiction side.
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn's a really good resource for getting to know who your target reader is in terms of who's following you, who you're engaging with, who's engaging with you. I'm almost up to 5,000 followers now on LinkedIn. I love the platform. I find it a really engaging platform. And through my posts, I'm able to find out the people who want to engage with me. And then when I wrote my book, I knew that exactly who I was going to be talking to. And the person I was going to be talking to didn't need convincing that they needed to write a book. The person that I was talking to already knew they wanted to write a book. They just didn't know how. Now, that is a very subtle difference, but it made my job as a writer much easier because I could get away with not having to tell people the reasons why writing a book was such a good idea because they already knew it. And that little differentiation between not having to convince people to I'm writing a book to people who already know they want to changes my narrative as a writer, because I just then assumed they were here because they wanted to write a book rather than trying to tell them that they needed to. This is what makes the difference when you know exactly who you're writing to from certainly a business book perspective, because it changes the content. Now, we're going to be talking about how to plan out your book later in another episode, but it's when you've identified the precise person that you're talking to, you'll find your writing then becomes a lot easier because you then know exactly what to say, and it really helps with your planning. So I think, Alexa, you also said about identifying with your reader. I think that's really true. When you identify with your reader, the person, when they're reading the book, is like, this book has been written as if the author's speaking directly to me. And that's when you know you've really got a cracking book on your hands. So yeah, LinkedIn's a great place for business side of books rather than your Instagram and your Facebook. Although I've got some success on Instagram, but Instagram is very much, I would say, more fiction and children's genre for sure. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
I don't know if in listening to this, it might all sound a bit overwhelming, and it does take time to dig around and gather the information. But once you have it, you can start to put yourself in the right spaces to start marketing yourself and your future published book to the right people. So you begin to get yourself noticed and to attract followers when you start sharing other people's posts and content and commenting on them and posting relevant things yourself that those people are going to want to read. You know, you can tell them about your book. Even if you haven't finished writing it yet, you can start telling them, you're going to want what I have to offer. And as a self-publishing author, this is a process that goes alongside writing your book. You know, you have to generate the interest if you want to make sales. So you have to keep showing up in the places where your audience is. And it doesn't have to be a drag. You can have fun with it. You can have fun interacting. You can have fun creating your content, because what you're really doing is creating a personal brand, and that's exciting. So in a few weeks' time, we're going to be talking to an amazing children's author who we've both worked with, who has totally mastered the art of finding an audience, connecting with them, generating such a buzz around her book that her pre-sales were flying. And that's the incredible Kylie Dixon. And we're very much looking forward to chatting with her.
Yes. I mean, she's a master at being able to identify who her target is, creating a buzz before she even started writing a book. I mean, I think she just mentioned it in her group that she was thinking of writing a book in lockdown, and they were like, yeah, sounds like a great idea. And then she did it, but she created the buzz before she even started. Another person that I've worked with who's had phenomenal success with her book as well is Catherine Gladwin. Now, she pre-sold her books, 50 copies of a book before she even started writing it. And that's the thing to do, is you need to get your interest up there, out on social media, so that when you have then finished your book, you've got your audience waiting for you. I mean, that's the ideal. You've got people going, yes, I want the book. When's it ready? When's it out? Rather than trying to do all of this once you've finished. So it's really important to get that bit done first, for sure. You always need to be thinking of the who. Who is it that you're talking to? Who is it that you're writing to? Where are you then going to market the book once it's written? And how you're going to engage your ideal reader as you're going through the journey. I mean, I love a very quick tip before Alexa's going to be going into a little bit more detail about what we're talking about next week, is one thing you can do to get really good engagement as well is to get the audience involved with your book production too. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about this when we cover in the typesetting, but if you can get your target engaged in the process, even if it means coming up with character names. I think Lee Child did this once. He ran a competition where he said one of the prizes would be that the person who won would then feature in his next book. I mean, what a great way of getting people engaged in the story. I mean, wouldn't you want to buy a book if you're featured in it? I mean, of course you are. When you can think of sort of creative ways of really getting your target audience engaged in the process of your writing, it then becomes really personal and people start to have an attachment to the end product. So they're much more likely to buy. Anyway, that's just a little top tip there for you. And I think Alexa's now going to explain exactly what we're going to be talking about in our next episode.
Yes, in our next episode, it sort of hangs a little bit on what we're talking about here, because talking about children's books, you have to target incredibly specifically. So we're going to talk about the different age groups. We'll talk about the language used and why that's important. With things like picture books, it's a really interesting thing as well to think about, is this a book that a very young child is going to read, like an early reader for them? Or is it going to be a book largely that the adult will be reading to their little child? Obviously in the picture books that the illustrations are very important, and sometimes you can tell part of the story just with the illustrations without the words at all, to keep that side very minimal. Yes, I'm looking forward to that.
I know it's going to be really exciting. I'm really looking forward to it too. And it's funny you should mention what you just did, because I'm actually working on a book at the moment where the book is very much aimed at the adult going to be reading it with their child, because there are quite a lot of questions that the adult will be talking to the child throughout the story. So it's a really good discussion point to know, is this going to be, like you said, a book that adults are reading with their children, or is this a book that the children's going to be reading on their own? And we're going to be talking about some of the examples that are out there. So yes, we will be talking to you, all of you, next week. So it's a goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.